Welcome to part 3 of the Little Life After Death series that we've done. This teaching is itself in 3 parts. First part is going to be the resurrections of the dead, the 2 resurrections that there will be. Part 2 is about the various judgments that are mentioned in Scripture, and part 3 will be about the kingdom. So, the resurrections of the dead, first of all. 1 Samuel 2 verse 6 says, Yahuwah puts to death and makes alive. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. So we have that one soul goes to Sheol. Also, it will be raised up from Sheol, that Yahuwah can do that. And that is recorded in the book of 1 Samuel, and we see this throughout the Tanakh referenced. Even Job referenced this event as happening. He said, if only you would hide me in Sheol, conceal me until your wrath turns away. Set for me a law and remember me. If a man dies, would he live again? All the days of my struggle I wait till my change comes. So, Job references a man dying and a man living again, and interestingly he refers to it as his change, which is what Shaul or Paul says when he says, we shall not all die, but we shall all be changed. In Psalm 17 verse 15 it says, as for me, let me see your face in righteousness. I am satisfied to see your appearance when I awake. Okay, so this again can be seen to refer to the dead awakening idiomatically, the dead being reborn in a spiritual body and seeing Yeshua as it will be. Romans 8:19-23 says, for the intense longing of the creation eagerly waits for the revealing of the sons of Elohim. Okay, and that term there, which is the eon of Elohim, that refers to those who are creations of Elohim. We will see a different term later on in the same passage, the teknon of Elohim, the children of Elohim. Sons of Elohim are different in Scripture. It can be used figuratively to speak of those who follow Yahuwah's words, who believe Yahuwah and are reborn of the word. They are sons of Elohim in a figurative sense. But Adam, being a son of Elohim, he is a direct creation. We see the angels as sons of Elohim, and we see Scripture record that they were there when Yahuwah brought things forth. So when a son of Elohim is mentioned, a literal son of Elohim, it is those that Elohim has created. And when we are reborn, or rather when we are born again of the Spirit, when we are given spiritual bodies, we will be sons of Elohim in the sense that we will be direct creations of Elohim. So the creation eagerly awaits for the revealing of the sons of Elohim, because the creation, which is in bondage to corruption at the moment, will be set at liberty at that time. And that's what this passage is describing. So when the sons of Elohim are revealed, when we get our spiritual bodies in that resurrection, that's what the creation is waiting for. It says, for the creation was subjected to futility, not from choice, but because of him who subjected it in anticipation. So unlike Adam, who made the choice to sin and knew that that would entail death upon him, the creation had no such choice. It was it was subjected to it because of him who subjected it. In other words, Adam. That the creation itself also shall be delivered from the bondage to corruption into the esteemed freedom of the children of Elohim. So that's a different word that is used there because it's describing something which is different. The teknon of Elohim and the huyon of Elohim are different, hence different words used in the same passage. The Hebrew word for sons is the same word as you would use for children. Any mixed group of people is referred to by the masculine term. So you would say sons, and that could mean what we would term as children. But the distinction is drawn here because what the creation is not awaiting, it's not awaiting the children of Elohim, those who are born of Elohim. It is awaiting those who are born again of the Spirit in spiritual bodies at Yeshua's coming. And not only so, but even we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, we ourselves also groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for the adoption, the redemption of our body. Mark 12 verse 18 says, "And Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him, and they asked him, saying," and then if we go on to verses 24 to 27, "And Yeshua in answering them said to them, Is this not why you go astray, because you do not know the scriptures, nor the power of Elohim? For when they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are as the angels in the heavens. And concerning the dead, that they rise, have you not read in the book of Moshe at the bush how Elohim spoke to him, saying, I am Elohim of Abraham, and the Elohim of Yitzchak, and the Elohim of Yaakov?" So the Sadducees, who believe that there is no resurrection, they asked him a question about somebody who had married 7 people, according to what the Torah says, about if someone has not borne you children, then your brother will, their brother rather, will marry you so that their name be continued. And they said, well, what if that happens 7 times? Whose wife will she be in the resurrection? And Yeshua says, he answers to them plainly, because Yeshua presumably knows that their question is questioning this doctrine of the resurrection. He says, look, concerning the dead, that they rise again, does Elohim himself not say that he is not the Elohim of the dead, but rather of the living? So that is who Elohim is, the Elohim of the living, not of the dead. The Sadducees' doctrine would have it, if there is no resurrection, the Elohim is the Elohim of those who have died. He is not the Elohim of the dead, but Elohim of the living. You then go greatly astray. Isaiah 25, 8-9 says, He shall swallow up death forever, and the Master Yahuwah shall wipe away tears from all faces, and take away the reproach of his people from all the earth, for Yahuwah has spoken. And it shall be said in that day, See, this is our Elohim. We have waited for him, and he saves us. This is Yahuwah. We have waited for him. Let us be glad and rejoice in his deliverance. And that deliverance is the deliverance from death. That is Yahuwah swallowing up death and delivering us from it. In that day we will say, This is our Elohim. We've waited for him, and see, this is him, he who saves us from death and gives us deliverance. Isaiah 26 verse 19 says, Let your dead live, together with my dead body let them arise. Awake and sing, you who dwell in the dust. For your dew is a dew of light, and let the earth give birth to the departed spirits. So Isaiah here speaks of the dead awakening, of the departed spirits returning, the earth giving birth to them figuratively. Here, the dead in Messiah will meet Messiah in the air. In 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verses 13 to 17, it says, "Now, brothers, we do not wish you to be ignorant concerning those who have fallen asleep, lest you be sad as others who have no expectation. For if we believe that Yeshua died and rose again, so also Elohim shall bring with him those who sleep in Yeshua. For we say, this we say to you by the word of the Master, that we, the living who are left over at the coming of the Master, shall in no way go before those who are asleep. Because the Master himself shall come down from heaven with a shout, with the voice of chief angels, and with the trumpet of Elohim, and the dead in Messiah shall rise first. And as we read in the psalm before, I will awake and see your face. They will meet Messiah in the air. Then we, the living who are left over, shall be caught away together with them in the clouds to meet the Master in the air. And so we shall always be with the Master." 2 Corinthians 5, 1-2 says, "For we know that if the tent of our earthly house is destroyed, we have a building from Elohim, a house not made with hands, everlasting in the heavens. For indeed in this we groan, longing to put on our dwelling, which is from heaven." So Paul says here that if our body, our physical body dies, then we have a house in the heavens that we will put on. Of course, speaking of the resurrection. So when the resurrection takes place, the dead in Messiah will meet him in the clouds first, and they will be given spiritual bodies, as we will see. And those who are left living at his coming, they will be changed. They will be reborn, or born again, as the scriptures say, of the Spirit. They will put on a spiritual body. In 1 Corinthians 15, 12-23, it says, "And if Messiah is proclaimed that he has been raised from the dead, how do some among you say there is no resurrection of the dead? And if there is no resurrection of the dead, the Messiah has not been raised. And if Messiah has not been raised, then our proclaiming is empty, and your belief also empty. And we have also found false witnesses of Elohim, because we have witnessed of Elohim that he raised up Messiah, whom he did not raise up, if then the dead are not raised. For if the dead are not raised, then neither Messiah has been raised. And if Messiah has not been raised, your belief is to no purpose. You are still in your sins." So what Paul is saying here is that if there's no resurrection of the dead, then Messiah hasn't been raised. Why? Because as happened to Messiah will happen to us. His soul went to Sheol and was raised from the dead, and he was the first fruits of the resurrection of the dead. And we also have that expectation of that salvation, the deliverance from death, when we will be raised from the dead. We will meet Messiah in the air, and we will be changed. We will be given spiritual bodies, as 1 Corinthians 15 proceeds to say later in the chapter. Verse 18 says, "Then also those who have fallen asleep in Messiah have perished. If in this life only we have expectation in Messiah, we are of all men the most wretched. But now Messiah has been raised from the dead, and has become the firstfruits of those having fallen asleep. For since death is through a man, resurrection of the dead is also through a man. For as all die in Adam, so also all shall be made alive in Mashiach. And each in his own order, Messiah the firstfruits, and then those who are of Messiah at his coming." John 3, 3-10 says, Yeshua answered and said to him, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born from above, he is unable to see the kingdom of Elohim. So remember that, unless one is born from above, he's unable to see the kingdom of Elohim. Nicodemus said to him, How is a man able to be born when he is old? Is he able to enter into his mother's womb a second time and to be born? Yeshua answered, Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he is unable to enter into the kingdom of Elohim. So Yeshua says here, you have to be born again, you have to be born of water, you also have to be born of the Spirit. A lot of the time people will talk about born again Christians as if they are already born of the Spirit, but this is not actually the case. We have been born of water, we are born a natural body, we will be born again as a spiritual body. We'll see this as we proceed through. Unless one is born of a spiritual body, one is unable to see the kingdom of Elohim. That which has been born of the flesh is flesh, and that which has been born of the Spirit is spirit. Do not marvel that I said to you, you have to be born from above. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but do not know where the wind comes from, where it comes from rather, and where it goes. So is everyone who has been born of the Spirit. Nicodemus answered and said to him, How is it possible for this to take place? Yeshua answered and said to him, Are you the teacher of Israel and do not know this? So, if Yeshua was talking about some new doctrine that mainstream Christianity would begin to teach, why would he be saying to Nicodemus, Are you the teacher of Israel and you do not know this? What Yeshua is talking about is something that this man should have already known, and that is of the resurrection. We see in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 40 says, And there are heavenly bodies and earthly bodies, but the esteem of the heavenly is truly one, and the esteem of the earthly is another. One esteem of the sun, and another esteem of the moon, and another esteem of the stars, for star differs from star in esteem. So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown in corruption, it is raised in incorruption. It is sown in disrespect, it is raised in esteem. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a natural body, it is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. And so it has been written, the first man, Adam, became a living soul, the last Adam, a life-giving spirit. The spiritual, however, was not the first, but the natural, and afterward the spiritual. The first man was of the earth, earthy, the second man is the master from heaven. As is the earthy, so also are those who are earthy, and as is the heavenly, so also are those who are heavenly. And as we have borne the likeness of the earthy, we shall also bear the likeness of the heavenly. And this I say, brothers, that flesh and blood is unable to inherit the kingdom of Elohim, neither does corruption inherit incorruption. So Paul there says exactly the same thing that Yeshua says to Nicodemus. He says that the natural body, the earthy, the flesh and blood is unable to inherit the kingdom of Elohim. That's what Yeshua says to Nicodemus, and says, you must be born again of the Spirit, which is what Paul is describing here, that we will be raised from the dead and we will have spiritual bodies, heavenly bodies, and they are the only ones that will be able to inherit the kingdom of Elohim. We must be born again of the Spirit. Okay, not reborn according to the word, as Peter says. That must happen to us also. But what Yeshua is describing as being born again of the Spirit is different. He says geneo anathon in the Greek, which means born again. When Peter speaks of being reborn, he says anageneo, okay, which is reborn. Geneo being born. So you can either be geneo anathon, born again, or anageneo, reborn. And we must be reborn according to the word of Elohim, according to the Spirit. But what Yeshua is specifically saying to Nicodemus is that you must have a spiritual body to inherit the kingdom of Elohim. See, I speak a secret to you. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible has to put on incorruption, this mortal to put on immortality, in order to be able to inherit the kingdom of Elohim. We must be changed. We must have spiritual bodies. We must be born again, according to born again of the Spirit. We must have spiritual bodies. Verse 54 says, and when this corruptible is put on incorruption, and this mortal is put on immortality, then shall come to be the word that has been written, death is swallowed up in overcoming. The more full version of 2 Corinthians 5, verses 1 to 7 says, for we know that if the tent of our earthly house is destroyed, we have a building from Elohim, a house not made with hands, everlasting in the heavens. For indeed in this we groan, longing to put on our dwelling which is from heaven, so that having put it on, we shall not be found naked. For indeed we who are in this tent groan, being burdened, not because we wish to put it off, but to put on the other, so that what is to die might be swallowed up by life. Now he who has prepared us for the same purpose is Elohim, who has given us the Spirit as a pledge of what is to come. So we are reborn according to the word. He's given us his Spirit so that we will be reborn as a pledge of what is to come when we put on the body which is from Elohim, that which is from heaven. Therefore, being always of good courage, and knowing that while we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Master, for we walk by belief, not sight. So that is what we believe is true, although we do not see that to be true in our everyday lives. That's what it is to believe in Yahuwah. John 20 verse 19 says, when therefore it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and when the doors were shut where the disciples met, for fear of the Jews, Yeshua came and stood in the midst and said to them, peace to you. So if Yeshua is the first fruits of the resurrection, presumably he has a spiritual body. It's interesting that it specifies here in John specifies the disciple whom Yeshua loved, who lay upon Yeshua's breast at the Last Supper, that he would record for us that when the doors were shut, then Yeshua came and stood in their midst. Whether this tells us anything about Yeshua's spiritual body, I'm not entirely sure. We read something very similar to that in the book of Mark, or rather it is also strange what is written of Yeshua. It says, and after this he appeared in another form to two of them as they walked and went into a field. Okay, so this is when he appeared on the road to Emmaus, it says he appeared in another form. I don't know exactly what that means. We're not given any more information about this. All I can think to do is to tell you that this is what it says. John 5:24-29 says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who hears my word and believes in him who sent me possesses everlasting life, and does not come into judgment, but has passed from death into life." And just as we saw last time, that Sheol is sometimes used as kind of a term, as this is where the dead who have no hope go, as well as it also being where those who are delivered from Sheol go. But it's kind of used as a term for the punishment of the wicked going to Sheol, because the righteous will be raised from Sheol. We see here judgment is used in a very similar way. When it says he does not come into judgment, we're told almost sit before the judgment seat of Messiah. Coming into judgment here is used again to speak of those who will suffer the second death, coming into judgment in a bad way, those who will be judged wicked. So he who hears me and believes in him who sent me possesses everlasting life, does not come into judgment, will not be under the power of Sheol, will not suffer the second death, but has passed from death into life. Truly, truly, I say to you, the hour is coming, and now is, when the dead shall hear the voice of the Son of Elohim, and those having heard shall live. For as the Father possesses life in himself, so he gave also to the Son to possess life in himself. And he has given him authority also to do judgment, because he is the son of Adam. Do not marvel at this, because the hour is coming in which all those in the tombs shall hear his voice, and shall come forth those who have done good to the resurrection of life, and those who have practiced evil matters to a resurrection of judgment. Okay, so some people will be judged to have been righteous, whether they're in the first resurrection or whether they're in the second resurrection. Some will be judged righteous. Others in the second resurrection will be judged to be wicked, and they will receive the second death, which is the death of the soul. Those who have, as John records here, who have practiced evil matters. Something to bear in mind is that all people are judged according to their works. Some, their belief is accounted to them as righteousness, but belief in Elohim existing is not the belief that the scriptures speak of. The scriptures speak of belief of his word. So if you believe Elohim's word, then you do the things that Elohim says are good. You can't claim to believe his word whilst also not doing the things he says are good and doing the things he says are bad, because otherwise you haven't believed what he has said. So all people are judged according to their works. Some people have the works of belief. Some people do good works, and some people have practiced evil matters. In Revelation 20:1-9 it says, "And I saw an angel coming down from the heaven, having the key to the pit of the deep, and a great chain in his hand." And if the pit of the deep is unfamiliar to you, then check out the first video in the Life After Death series. "And he seized the dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years. So this is what happens when the angel comes down, having the key to the pit of the deep, or the bottomless pit. He seizes Satan and he binds him for 1,000 years. And he threw him into the pit of the deep, and shut him up, and set a seal on him, so that he should lead the nations no more astray until the 1,000 years were ended. And after that, he has to be released for a little while. So remember that Satan cannot lead the nations astray when he is in the bottomless pit, only when he is released after the 1,000 years have ended. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them, and the souls of those who had been beheaded, because of the witness they bore to Yeshua, and because of the word of Elohim, those who will not worship the image of the beast, and who did not worship the beast nor his image, and they did not receive his mark upon their foreheads or upon their hands. And they lived and reigned with Messiah for 1,000 years. That's the first resurrection. The rest of the dead did not come to life until the 1,000 years were ended, and we'll see those. It says, this is the first resurrection. Blessed and set apart is the one having part in the first resurrection. The second death possesses no authority over these, but they shall be priests of Elohim and of Messiah, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. And to be a priest of Elohim can be a confusing idea for people, because we're used to priests in churches and man-made systems of priests, or we're used to the priests who used to serve in the tabernacle or in the temple and offer offerings to Elohim. But a priest, all it is one who kahans. Okay, priests in Hebrew is kohanim, and that means ones who do the verb to kahan. And to kahan is to represent a third party according to their word. So that is what it means when it says they will be priests of Elohim and of Messiah, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. So those who take part in the first resurrection, they will actually reign with Messiah. And we'll see when we get to looking at the kingdom how there is the kingdom for the people of the nation Israel, and there is the kingdom for the rest of the nations. The other nations are there also. So those who take part in the first resurrection will rule and reign with Messiah in the kingdom over those nations. Now, it says here that Satan, does not lead the nations astray until the 1,000 years have ended. And I want you to bear that in mind as we read through Daniel 11. It says, when the 1,000 years have ended, Satan shall be released from his prison, and he shall go out to lead the nations astray, which are in the four corners of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together for battle, whose number is as the sand of the sea. Okay, so they're gathered together for battle around the beloved city, as we will see, around Jerusalem. Verse 9 says, and came up over the breadth of the earth, and surrounded the camp of the set-apart ones in the beloved city, and fire came down from Elohim out of heaven, and consumed them. And this is after the 1,000 years have ended, when they come to the beloved city, and they besiege it, all the nations of the earth. Bear that in mind as we read now Daniel 11. It says, at the time of the end, the king of the south shall push at him, and the king of the north rush against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall enter the lands, and shall overflow, and pass over, and shall enter the splendid land, and many shall stumble. Okay, so the entering of the splendid land, surrounding of the beloved city, the camp of the set-apart ones, people being led astray again, all of this happens after the 1,000 years. But these escape from his hand, Edom and Moab, and the chief of the sons of Ammon. And he shall stretch out his hand against the lands, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. And he shall rule over the treasures of gold and silver, and over all the riches of Mitzrayim, and Libyans and Cushites shall be at his steps. Then reports from the east and the north shall disturb him, and he shall go out with great wrath to destroy and put many under the ban. And he shall pitch the tents of his palace between the seas and the splendid set apart mountain. Okay, so again, this is all happening after the 1,000 years. But shall come to his end with none to help him. This is when fire comes down from Elohim. And it says, now at that time, after the 1,000 years, Michael shall stand up, the great head who is standing over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of distress, such as never was since there was a nation, until that time. And at that time your people shall be delivered, every one who is found written in the book. Note that everyone who is found written in the book will be delivered. Many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth wake up, some to everlasting life, some to reproaches, everlasting abhorrence. And those who have insight shall shine like the brightness of the heavens, and those who lead many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. So when it says those who sleep in the dust, some shall arise to everlasting life, some to everlasting abhorrence. It says at that time, after the 1,000 years, this is going to happen. So after the 1,000 years, as we continue to read in Revelation 20, we're going to see this resurrection mentioned, when some will wake up to everlasting life and some to everlasting abhorrence. And it mentioned the people being delivered who are written in the book. This is exactly what we read of in Revelation 20. Revelation 20, 10-15 says, and the devil who led them astray was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, where the beast and the false prophet are. That's the first and second beast. And they shall be tormented day and night forever and ever. And I saw a great white throne, and him who was sitting on it, from whose face the earth and the heaven fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, small and great, standing before the throne, and books were opened, and another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged from what was written in the books according to their works. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it, and death and Sheol gave up the dead who were in them. And they were judged, each one according to his works. So this is what is spoken of in Daniel 12, where it says, some will rise to everlasting life, some to everlasting abhorrence. And it is those who are found written in the book, as it says in Daniel 12, will be delivered. Exactly the same as we're reading about here. And the people are judged at this point according to their work. So they're not the people who were in the first resurrection. Blessed are those people, because they will rule and reign with Messiah for 1,000 years. But after that 1,000 years, there's another resurrection of the dead, when people are then judged according to their works. First resurrection, just those who believe in Yeshua. Second resurrection, all of the rest, and they're judged according to their works, according to what was written in the books. And death and Sheol were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death. And if anyone was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. So in that second resurrection, those who are found written in the book of life, who are judged according to their works, will be raised to everlasting life. The rest will be cast into the lake of fire, those not written in the book of life. Later in Daniel 12 it says, and he said, go, Daniel, for the words are hidden and sealed till the time of the end. Often when people think of the time of the end, they think of what is kind of colloquially known, even among those who are secular, non-believers, as the end times. But that is not always what the scripture is referring to as the time of the end. The time of the end can be what is described as in the latter days, okay, after the 1,000 years. And he said, "Go, Daniel, for the words are hidden and sealed till the time of the end. Many shall be cleansed and made white and refined, but the wrong shall do wrong, and none of the wrong shall understand, but those who have insight shall understand. And from the time that which is continual is taken away, and the abomination that lays waste is set up, is 1,290 days." And I'm not going to get into the interpretation of such prophecies here. If you just take the themes that the righteous do well, are found clean before him, those who are wicked are punished and go away into everlasting abhorrence, that is enough to understand. Blessed is he who is waiting earnestly and comes to the 1,335 days. But you go your way till the end and rest and arise to your lot at the end of days. And what each of our lot will be judged by Elohim. So in this part, I'm going to look at how our lot at the time of the end will be determined, whether we will be raised in the first resurrection, whether we will be raised in the second resurrection, or of those who will be raised in the second resurrection, what their lot will be. Now, I said in the first part of this Life After Death series that when Hebrews 9:27 says, "And it has been appointed for man to die once, and after this the judgment," that what it might be talking about is once you die, then you will go either to one place in Sheol, Abraham's bosom, and be close with Abraham, or you will go to where the rich man ended up, where he was tormented by the flame of his destruction. Because in and of itself, that is a judgment having been made of you. Now, when it says the judgment here, we know that it's not referring to the judgment of all men, as in the judgment by Yahuwah, by Yeshua of all men, because judgment is singular, whereas we see multiple judgments in Scripture, which makes me think even more that the judgment that this is talking about is when you die, you will either go to one side of Sheol or the other. You will have been judged already at that point as to your fate, so to speak. However, the judgment of you according to your works by Yeshua, that will be separate, and there are multiple judgments of that type which we'll look at in this part. 2 Corinthians 5:10-11 says, "For we all have to appear before the judgment seat of Messiah, in order for each one to receive according to what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. Knowing therefore the fear of Elohim, fear of Yahuwah, we persuade men. But we have been made manifest to Elohim, and I also trust in your consciences to have been manifested." So we see from this that we will each appear before the judgment seat of Yeshua, of Mashiach, and we will be judged according to our works. In John 5:24 it says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who hears my word and believes in him who sent me possesses everlasting life, and does not come into judgment, but has passed from death into life." Now we know that the scriptures don't contradict one another, so each of us will appear before the judgment seat of Mashiach. As I mentioned earlier, this judgment is synonymous with being judged wicked the judgment. He does not come into judgment, rather, not the judgment. He does not come into judgment. Just like, as I mentioned, Sheol is mentioned in various places, synonymous with those who have gone down to Sheol and will suffer the death of the soul. In Proverbs 15:24 it says, the path of life is upward for the wise, to turn away from Sheol below. Okay, and that is talking about one's soul being delivered from Sheol if you walk in the path of life, if you're one of the wise. In Job 24 verse 19 it says, drought and heat snatch away snow waters, Sheol snatches away those who have sinned. Okay, so it's speaking of Sheol here, of as snatching away those who have sinned, because the power of Sheol is the death of the soul if you are not delivered from Sheol. So sometimes Sheol is spoken of as the end of those whom are not delivered from it. Okay, but it just says Sheol is where sinners go. Well, it is where sinners go, but it's where all men go, just some are delivered from it. But Sheol is the ultimate end for those who have sinned. And judgment is spoken of in the same sort of way here. You pass into judgment is those who have lost their souls, who have suffered the second death as a result of their actions. Psalm 116, 1-8 says, I love Yahuwah because he has heard my voice, my pleas, because he has inclined his ear to me, and I shall call throughout my days. The cords of death were around me, and the pains of Sheol came upon me. I found distress and sorrow. Then I called upon the name of Yahuwah. O Yahuwah, I pray to you, deliver my soul. Yahuwah shows favor and is righteous, and our Elohim is compassionate. Yahuwah guards the simple. I was brought low, but he saved me. Return to your rest, O my soul, for Yahuwah has treated you well. For you have delivered my soul from death, my eyes from tears, my feet from falling. So not that one soul doesn't go to Sheol, not that one never cries, not that one's feet never fall, but that Yahuwah, through his power, has delivered us from all of those things. Matthew 23:14-15 says, Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you eat up widows' houses, and for a show make long prayers. Because of this you shall receive greater judgment. So we can see from this that there is a gradation in judgment. For some, lesser judgment; for some, greater judgment. This appears to be talking about the severity of the judgment here. Verse 15 says, Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, because you go about the land and the sea to win one convert, and when he is won, you make him a son of Gehenna, twofold more than yourselves. So again, we see this gradation in judgment. We see a similar term used in James 3 verse 1. Not many of you should become teachers, my brothers, knowing that we shall receive greater judgment. And perhaps in this case, instead of the severity of the judgment, it is talking about how exacting the judgment is, how closely one is observed and judged, although it certainly could be talking about the severity of the judgment also. Matthew 5 verse 19 says, Whoever then breaks one of the least of these commands and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does and teaches them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. I think a lot of the time when people look at this, they think that there are going to be some people who have taught against the commands in the kingdom, and they'll be least, and those who have taught the commands will be great. But that's not necessarily how this is. What it says is they will be called least, or they will be called great in the kingdom. Could be referring to how they are referred to in the kingdom. Those who teach against the commands are least. Those who teach the commands are great. Hebrews 4 verse 12 says, the word of Elohim is living and working and sharper than any two-edged sword, cutting through even to the dividing of soul and spirit, and of joints and marrow, and able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. And indeed, it is the word of Elohim by which we are judged at the end. Yeshua in John 5 said, do not think that I shall accuse you to the Father. There is one who accuses you, Moshe, in whom you have set your expectation. So he's speaking to people and saying, look, you've set your expectation in the fact that you've got the Torah. Actually, it's the Torah by which you're going to be judged. It's not me that's going to accuse you to the Father. It's going to be the word of Elohim, which is going to show you, it's going to be a witness against you that you are in transgression against it. In Proverbs 24 verse 12, we see something important to bear in mind when we're thinking about people being judged. It says, if you say, see, we did not know this, would not he who weighs the hearts discern it? He watches over your soul. Would he not know it? He who watches over your soul. Would he not know it? And shall he not repay man according to his work? So again, throughout it, we see the people are repaid according to their work. People who did not know something, Yahuwah knows that. He who weighs their hearts is going to know what they knew and what they didn't know. To whom much is given, much shall be expected. So if you know much of the word, that is an abundant blessing to you. But if you know much of the word and you decide to go against the word, then that will be a serious infraction. Whereas people who did what was wrong but did not know will be judged differently, as Yeshua says in Luke 12. And that servant who knew his master's desire or his master's will, and did not prepare, nor did according to his desire, shall be beaten with many stripes. But he who did not know, yet did what deserved flogging, shall be beaten with few. And everyone to whom much has been given, from him much shall be demanded. And to whom much has been entrusted, from him much more shall be asked. I came to send fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. So, if somebody knows what Yahuwah's will is and doesn't do it, then that is worse than somebody who doesn't know what his will is and yet does what is wrong in his eyes. Those who do not know will be held to a different standard than those who do know, because those who do know are sinning willfully. Matthew 3 verse 12 says, his winnowing fork is in his hand, and he shall thoroughly cleanse his threshing floor, and gather his wheat into the storehouse, but the chaff he shall burn with unquenchable fire. So we see there the two ultimate ends of people. Some will be gathered into a storehouse, and some will be burned with fire. Some of those who are gathered into a storehouse, however, will not be those who believe in Yeshua, who believe in the word. Okay, some of them, as we see in Matthew 25, when the nations are judged, and some of those of the nations are gathered into the kingdom, as we will get onto, are not people who believe. They are people who did good works towards those who believed at the time of the end, or in the end times, as we would more traditionally think of it. The chaff, however, that which he doesn't want, he burns with unquenchable fire. Matthew 7:21-23 says, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who is doing the will of my Father in heaven. So just calling Yeshua Master is not enough. Okay, some people will not call him Master, and yet they will be gathered into the storehouse. Some people will call him Master, and yet will be those burned with unquenchable fire. Verse 22 says, Many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work anomia. Okay, translated here as lawlessness. The Greek word anomia, when we have words which mean without, we put an A at the beginning, like we may say that somebody is amoral, without morality. Okay, nomia is from the word nomos, which means law. The Hebrew word for law parallels the Greek word. It is Torah or Torah. Okay, so the nomos is the law. The Torah or the Torah is also the law. Anomia is to be without law, translated here as lawlessness. Really what it's getting at is those who act as if there is no law. By the law, sin is defined. As Paul said, he said, I would not know sin if it were not for the law. So anomia is sin. And we see that in 1 John 3 verse 4. Everyone doing sin also does lawlessness, and sin is anomia. I came to send fire on the earth, and how I wish it were already kindled. So if somebody knows what Yahuwah's will is and doesn't do it, then that is worse than somebody who doesn't know what his will is and yet does what is wrong in his eyes. Those who do not know will be held to a different standard than those who do know, because those who do know are sinning willfully. Matthew 3 verse 12 says, His winnowing fork is in his hand, and he shall thoroughly cleanse his threshing floor, and gather his wheat into the storehouse, but the chaff he shall burn with unquenchable fire. So we see there the two ultimate ends of people. Some will be gathered into a storehouse, and some will be burned with fire. Some of those who are gathered into a storehouse, however, will not be those who believe in Yeshua, who believe in the word. Okay, some of them, as we see in Matthew 25, when the nations are judged, and some of those of the nations are gathered into the kingdom, as we will get onto, are not people who believe. They are people who did good works towards those who believed at the time of the end, or in the end times, as we would more traditionally think of it. The chaff, however, that which he doesn't want, he burns with unquenchable fire. Matthew 7:21-23 says, Not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who is doing the will of my Father in heaven. So just calling Yeshua Master is not enough. Okay, some people will not call him Master, and yet they will be gathered into the storehouse. Some people will call him Master, and yet will be those burned with unquenchable fire. Verse 22 says, Many shall say to me in that day, Master, Master, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and done many mighty works in your name? And then I shall declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who work anomia. Okay, translated here as lawlessness. The Greek word anomia, when we have words which mean without, we put an A at the beginning, like we may say that somebody is amoral, without morality. Okay, nomia is from the word nomos, which means law. The Hebrew word for law parallels the Greek word. It is Torah or Torah. Okay, so the nomos is the law, the Torah or the Torah is also the law. Anomia is to be without law, translated here as lawlessness. Really what it's getting at is those who act as if there is no law. By the law, sin is defined. As Paul said, he said, I would not know sin if it were not for the law. So anomia is sin. And we see that in 1 John 3 verse 4. Everyone doing sin also does lawlessness, and sin is anomia. So Yeshua is saying to the people in Matthew 7, here in verse 23, he says, and then I shall declare to them, I never knew you, depart from me, you who work sin. Because sin is anomia. That's what anomia is, being without law, being lawless. You see here he says in verse 21, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he who is doing the will of my Father in heaven. So what is the will of the Father? He says, you're not doing the will of the Father. Depart from me, you who do sin, you who are without law. What is the will of the Father? I have delighted to do your will, O my Elohim. Your Torah is within my heart. That's the Hebrew word which is used there, is Torah. It means law, just like nomos means law in Greek. Anomia is to be without law. Well, those who don't do the will of the Father are those who are without law, without Torah. Here the psalmist says, I've delighted to do your will. Your Torah is within my heart. Those who don't do his will are those who are without Torah, are without the teaching and instruction of Elohim. And they are the ones that Yeshua tells to depart from him. Luke 6:46-49 says, but why do you call me Master, Master, and do not do what I say? Everyone who is coming to me and is hearing my words and is doing them, I shall show you whom he is like. Okay, so if you remember, he says, not everyone who says to me, Master, Master, is going to end up in the kingdom. There are those who are without being taught or instructed by Elohim, those who are without his law, his nomos, his Torah, those who do not hear and do Elohim's words. Everyone who is coming to me and is hearing my words and is doing them, he is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when a flood came, the stream burst against that house, but was unable to shake it, for it was founded on the rock. But the one hearing and not doing, those who are without law, is like a man who built a house on the earth without a foundation, against which the stream burst, and immediately it fell, and the fall of that house was great. So those who come to Yeshua and they say to him, Master, Master, but they don't do what he says. They do not do the Torah. They do not do the nomos, the law of Elohim. They are these people who hear but do not do. The one hearing and not doing, as it says here in verse 49. It's like a man who built a house on the earth without a foundation. That's what the word of Elohim is. It is our foundation. So it's no point calling Yeshua Master and not doing the word of Elohim. So those who will be cast into the fire will include those who call Yeshua Lord or call him Master, but he will say to them, depart from me, I never knew you. You were not foreknown to me. You were never one of the chosen. Matthew 13:47-50 says, again, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that was thrown into the sea and gathered some of every kind, which when it was filled they drew to the shore, and they set it down and gathered the good into containers, but threw the rotten away. So the kingdom of heaven those people who will call Yeshua Master. Among them there is good and there is bad, and they will be divided one from the other. Thus it shall be at the end of the age. The angel shall come forth and separate the wicked out the midst of the righteous, and shall throw them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. So, wailing is obviously crying. Gnashing of teeth is idiomatic, figurative for frustration. There's going to be crying and frustration. As you can well imagine, if there are people who thought that they were Yeshua's servants all of their life, and then they're told at the time of the end, no, you were in the kingdom of heaven, but you were the bad that was separated out. You can imagine those people being very upset and frustrated that they were to be cast into the lake of fire. Matthew 22:11-14 says, and when the king came in to view the guests, he saw there a man who had not put on a wedding garment. And he said to him, friend, how did you come in here not having a wedding garment? And he was speechless. Then the king said to the servants, bind him hand and foot, take him away, and throw him out into the outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. For many are called, but few are chosen. So, just being called by Elohim, calling him Master, is not enough to be one of the chosen who are foreknown by him. Now, the king here at the wedding is figurative, is a parable about the wedding supper of the Lamb. So how are we to be attired? What is the wedding garment which we are to wear? Revelation 19:7-8 says, let us be glad and rejoice and give him praise, for the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife prepared herself. And to her it was given to be dressed in fine linen, clean and bright. This is the wedding garment. And what is that? For the fine linen is the righteousnesses of the set apart ones. So again, we are judged according to our works. We must be found suitably attired for the wedding, dressed in fine linen, which is righteousness. Matthew 24:48-51 says, but if that evil servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant shall come on a day when he does not expect it, and at an hour he does not know, and shall cut him in two and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So again, you can be one who calls yourself the servant of Elohim. However, if you begin to act in an unrighteous manner, Yeshua will come at a time when you are not expecting it. Why? Because you're not attending to your behavior. And you will be appointed your portion with the hypocrites. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth from those who think that they know Elohim, who say that they believe in God, that they read the Bible, and they call Yeshua Master. In Luke 13:22-28, it says, and he was going through the cities and villages, teaching and journeying toward Jerusalem. And someone said to him, Master, are there few who are being saved? And he said to them, strive to enter through the narrow gate, because many, I say to you, shall seek to enter in and shall not be able. Many are going to seek to enter the narrow gate, which only few find, but they will not be able to. When once the master of the house has risen up and shut the door, and you begin to stand outside and knock at the door, saying, Master, Master, open for us, he shall answer and say to you, I do not know you, where you are from. Then you shall begin to say, we ate and drank in your presence, and you taught in our streets. But he shall say, I say to you, I do not know you, where you are from. Depart from me, all you workers of unrighteousness, you who work anomia, you who work sin. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth when you see Abraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov and all the prophets in the kingdom of Elohim, and yourselves thrown outside. Matthew 13:40-42 says, As the tares then are gathered and burned in the fire, so it shall be at the end of this age. The Son of Adam shall send out his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all the stumbling blocks and those doing anomia or sin, and shall throw them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth from his servants. They're the ones who weep and are frustrated because he gathers out of his kingdom the tares. There will be good and there will be bad. The bad are bundled up and burned in the fire. 2 Peter 2:4-9 says, For if Elohim did not spare the angels who sinned, but sent them to Tartarus, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be kept for judgment, and did not spare the world of old, but preserved Noah, a proclaimer of righteousness, and 7 others, bringing in the flood on the world of the wicked, and having reduced to ashes the cities of Sodom and Amorah, condemned them to destruction, having made them an example to those who afterward would live wickedly, and rescued righteous Lot, who was oppressed with the indecent behavior of the lawless. For day after day that righteous man dwelling among them tormented his righteous soul by seeing and hearing their lawless works or their sinful deeds. Okay, so it says here in verse 6, having reduced to ashes the cities of Sodom and Amorah, he condemned them to destruction. And that was an example to those who afterward would live wickedly. That is the outcome for the wicked. They will be reduced to ashes and destroyed. Verse 9 says, Then Yahuwah knows how to rescue the reverent ones from trial, and to keep the unrighteous unto the day of judgment to be punished. So Yahuwah knows how to keep the reverent ones from trial, how to rescue them from trial. But also the unrighteous, even those among his kingdom who are unrighteous, are kept unto the day of judgment to be punished. Judgment again used in its negative sense here to talk of those who are judged and found wanting. So just as those among his kingdom can be found unworthy, we certainly can be found worthy. So we have the consequences of sin being a part of his kingdom, but we also have rewards that are promised to us. We see these in Revelation 2 and 3. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. To him who overcomes, I shall give to eat from the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of Elohim. So that is certainly one of the rewards. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. He who overcomes shall by no means be harmed by the second death, as we've seen previously. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the assemblies. To him who overcomes, I shall give some of the hidden manna to eat, and I shall give him a white stone, and on the stone a new name written, which no one knows except him who receives it. He who overcomes shall be dressed in white robes, and I shall by no means blot out his name from the book of life, but I shall confess his name before my Father and before his angels. And he who overcomes and guards my works until the end, to him I shall give authority over the nations. They will rule and reign with Messiah, and he shall shepherd them with a rod of iron, as the potter's vessel shall be broken to pieces, as I also have received from my Father. He who overcomes, I shall make him a supporting post, or a supporting pillar in the dwelling place of my Elohim, and he shall by no means go out, and I shall write on him the name of my Elohim, and the name of the city of my Elohim, the new Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my Elohim, and my new name. To him who overcomes I shall give to sit with me on my throne. They will rule and reign with Messiah, as I also overcame and sat down with my Father on his throne in heaven. So they are some of the specific rewards which we are told about. Rewards are mentioned elsewhere in the scriptures. In Matthew 16:24-27 it says, Then Yeshua said to his disciples, If anyone wishes to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his soul shall lose it, and whoever loses his soul for my sake shall find it. For what is a man profited if he gains all the world and loses his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Adam is going to come in the esteem of his Father with his angels, and then he shall reward each according to his works. And we're going to see about Yeshua coming in his esteem with his angels and giving everyone according to their works of people who are not the brethren. We will read of that in Matthew 25. But the point that Yeshua makes here is that if you gain all of the world, but your soul is to die upon death, what does it really profit you? Profits you nothing. And what will you give in exchange for your soul? The only ransom for your soul is Yeshua's blood. It is only Elohim who can pay the ransom for your soul, to not be under the power of death, the power of Sheol, to be destroyed, which is the second death. Matthew 6:19-20 says, Do not lay up for yourselves treasure on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. 1 Corinthians 3:10-15 says, According to the favor of Elohim which was given to me, as a wise master builder I have laid the foundation, and another builds on it. But each one should look how he builds on it. For no one is able to lay any other foundation except that which is laid, which is Yeshua Messiah, or the word of Elohim, as Yeshua put it. Yeshua being the word made flesh, of course. And if anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will be revealed, for the day will show it up, because it is revealed by fire. And the fire shall prove the work of each one, what sort it is. If anyone's work remains, which he is built on, he shall receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved. But so as through fire. So our works will be proved, so to speak, by fire. What the fire leaves, what remains, is that which is built or founded on the word of Elohim. Luke 6:26 says, Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for thus the fathers did to the false prophets. If we contrast that with what Yeshua says in Matthew 5:11-12, it says, Blessed are you when they reproach and persecute you, and falsely say every wicked word against you for my sake. Rejoice and be glad, because your reward in heaven is great, for in this way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. So if all men speak well of you, woe to you, because that's what they did to the false prophets. But if you're speaking truth, then your reward in heaven will be great. 2 Peter 3:1-14 says, This is now, beloved ones, the second letter I write to you, in which I stir up your sincere mind to remember the words previously spoken by the set-apart prophets, and of the command of the Master and Saviour, spoken by your apostles, knowing this first, that mockers shall come in the last days with mocking, walking according to their own lusts, and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all continues as from the beginning of creation. For they choose to have this hidden from them, that the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water by the word of Elohim, through which the world at that time was destroyed, being flooded with water. And the present heavens and the earth are treasured up by the same word, being kept for fire, to a day of judgment and eternal punishment, punishing of wicked men. No, the destruction of wicked men, like the world in the past was destroyed. But beloved ones, let not this one matter be hidden from you, that with Yahuwah 1 day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is 1 day. Yahuwah is not slow in regards to the promise, as some count slowness, but is patient toward us, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. But the day of Yahuwah shall come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with intense heat, and the earth and the works that are in it shall be burned up. Seeing all these are to be destroyed in this way, what kind of people ought you to be in set-apart behavior and reverence, because you might be destroyed in that way? Looking for and hastening the coming of the day of Elohim, through which the heavens shall be destroyed, being set on fire, and the elements melt with intense heat. But according to his promise, we wait for a new heavens and a new earth, in which righteousness dwells. So then, beloved ones, looking forward to this, do your utmost to be found by him in peace, spotless and blameless. Mark 9:33-35 says, and they came to Capernaum, and being in the house he asked them, saying, what was it you disputed among yourselves on the way? And they were silent, for on the way they had disputed with one another who was the greatest. And sitting down, he called the 12 and said to them, if anyone wishes to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all. Okay, so in the way that we would think of those who are first and those who are last, i.e. those who perhaps are ruling over people, that's how man might think of somebody who was first. Yeshua said, with you, it will not be that way. Okay, if you want to be great, then you will be the servant of all. That is who will be judged to be great. In Mark 10:35-45 it says, and Yaakov and Yochanan, the sons of Zabdi, came up to him, saying, teacher, we wish that you would do for us whatever we ask. And he said to them, what do you wish me to do for you? And they said to him, grant us to be seated in your glory, or in your esteem, same word in Greek, on one on your right hand and the other on your left. But Yeshua said to them, you do not know what you ask. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, and be immersed with the immersion that I am immersed with? And they said to him, we are able. And Yeshua said to them, you shall indeed drink the cup that I drink, and with the immersion that I am immersed with, you shall be immersed. But to sit on my right hand and on my left, remember, when he comes in his glory or in his esteem, is not mine to give, but it is for those to whom it has been prepared, or for whom it has been prepared. And when the 10 heard it, they began to be sorely displeased with Yaakov and Yochanan. And Yeshua, calling them near, said to them, you know that those who think to rule the nations are masters over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it is not so among you, but whoever wishes to become great among you shall be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you shall be servant of all. For even the Son of Adam did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. So what did Yeshua mean when he says, to sit on my right hand and my left is not mine to give, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared? Well, remember, they're talking about when he comes in his glory. Matthew 25:31-33 says, when the Son of Adam comes in his glory and all the set-apart angels with him, then he shall sit on the throne of his esteem, or the throne of his glory. And that's the same word in that passage. And all the nations shall be gathered before him, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd separates his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. So they're asking to be sat on his right hand and on his left hand. And he says, you don't know what you're asking for, because we know for the goats who are sat on his left hand, it does not go well, because they did not treat the brethren correctly. But this sheep and goats judgment is another judgment where the nations are judged according to how they treated the brethren when the events described in Matthew 24 are taking place. Those who feed them, give them to drink, visit them when they are sick or in prison, are invited into the kingdom. So to recap on the judgments that we see in Scripture, Yeshua returns and sends out his angels to gather the good and bad among the brethren. The wicked are gathered into bundles and burned. The dead in Messiah are raised, and those left over are changed. They inherit spiritual bodies. Yeshua judges the nations. The wicked go into the lake of fire, and the righteous inherit the kingdom. At some point, we all sit before the judgment seat of Messiah, whenever that may be. After the 1,000 years, Hasatan is released and leads the nations astray. The nations come against the holy city, and fire comes down from heaven and destroys them. The books are opened, and the rest of the dead are judged. Those who are not found written in the book of life are cast into the lake of fire. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Okay, so in this part, what we're going to look at is the kingdom which is promised. We looked in part 1 at how people confuse the kingdom with what people think of as heaven. They think they go to heaven when they die. It's not actually what happens. Our souls go to Sheol. We will be resurrected from the dead into spiritual bodies, and those spiritual bodies are able to inherit the kingdom of Elohim. So we're given some pretty fantastic promises about the kingdom, some of the best promises in Scripture. Daniel 2 verse 44 says, in the days of these kings, the Allah of heaven shall set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, nor the kingdom pass on to other people. It crushes and puts an end to all these kingdoms, and it will stand forever. So this is the statue that Nebuchadnezzar sees in his dream, which symbolizes all the kingdoms which will come to be on the earth. After all those kingdoms, Yahuwah sets up his own kingdom. That's the promise that we have. In Revelation 11 verse 15 it says, and the seventh angel sounded, and there came to be loud voices in the heaven, saying, the kingdom of this world has become the kingdom of our Master and of his Messiah, and he shall reign forever and ever. In Daniel 7:13-14 it says, I was looking in the night visions and saw one like the son of Enosh. When it says the son of Enosh, sometimes we read of the son of Adam being translated as the son of man. The other word for man is Enosh as well as Ish. So this is the son of man. Saw one like the son of man coming with the clouds of heaven. And he came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And to him was given rulership and preciousness and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His rule is an everlasting rule, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. And you'll notice here that it says, here in verse 14, and to him was given rulership and preciousness and a kingdom, that all peoples and nations. Okay, and we're going to look as we go on at how the nations will come to serve Yeshua. The basic model being that Yeshua rules and we rule and reign with him in the positions of authority in his kingdom. Zechariah 14 verse 9 says, and Yahuwah shall be king over all the earth. In that day there shall be one Yahuwah, or it says, Echad Yahuwah, and his name one. In Isaiah 66 verse 8 it says, who has heard the like of this? Who has seen the like of these? Is a land brought forth in one day? Is a nation born at once? For as soon as Sion labored, she gave birth to her children. And many people will confuse this to be about the establishment of the state of Israel in 1948. But of course, that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about Yahuwah's kingdom being set up on the earth. In 1 Corinthians 2 verse 9, it says, but as it has been written, eye has not seen, nor an ear has not heard, rather, nor have entered into the heart of man what Elohim has prepared for those who love him. Pretty much the way I understand this is it saying you can't even imagine what it's going to be like, or at least nobody up until the point at which this was written had ever imagined what it was going to be like. To know what the kingdom is going to be like, and to see a little bit of our relationship with the nations as the nation Yisrael dwelling in the land, we need to read 7 chapters of the book of Isaiah. They are chapters 60 through 66, and reading these chapters we will learn much about the kingdom that is to come. Isaiah 60 verse 1 says, arise, shine, for your light has come, and the esteem of Yahuwah has risen upon you. For look, darkness covers the earth, and thick darkness the peoples, but Yahuwah arises over you, and his esteem is seen upon you. And this is talking about Yerushalayim, New Jerusalem. There's a distinction that Scripture draws between the nations and the nation, Yisrael. The peoples, Ha'amim, and the people of Yisrael, Ha'am Yisrael. So when it says thick darkness, the peoples, it's talking about the nations. But Yahuwah arises over you, and his esteem is seen upon you. And the nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. Lift up your eyes all around, and see, all of them have gathered. They have come to you. Your sons come from afar, your daughters are supported on the side. So in the kingdom, it speaks of the nations coming to Yisrael, the nations serving Yisrael, in fact, and it is not in some kind of slave and master sort of situation. It seems that the people see Israel as a light to them. Remember, Elohim will be dwelling in their midst at the time Yeshua will be reigning, and we, his set apart ones, or his saints, to use older, more old school language, will be ruling and reigning with him over the nations. Then you shall see and be bright, and your heart shall throb and swell, for the wealth of the sea is turned to you, and the riches of the nations come to you. A stream of camels cover your land, the dromedaries of Midian and Ephah. All those from Shavah come bearing gold and incense and most amazingly, they come proclaiming the praises of Yahuwah. This is what it will be like when Yahuwah has a kingdom on the earth. This is the reaction of the peoples, as opposed to the reaction of the peoples to his people at the moment, quite different. All the flocks of Kedar are gathered to you, the rams of Nebaioth serve you. They come up for acceptance on my altar, and I embellish my esteemed house. So you'll notice here that these animals, the flocks of Kedar, the rams of Nebaioth, are offered in Elohim's house. As we go through this, we're going to see that there is going to be a temple on the earth, not in New Jerusalem, but certainly there will be a temple in the land of Israel. And we see the Gentiles, the nations, bringing offerings to it. Who are these who fly like a cloud and drive doves to their windows? Because the coastlands wait for me, and the ships of Tarshish thirst to bring your sons from afar, their silver and their gold with them, to the name of Yahuwah your Elohim, and to the set-apart one of Israel, because he has adorned you. That is what Yahuwah is to us. He is beautifying. And the sons of foreigners shall build your walls, and their kings serve you. For in my wrath I have stricken you, but in my delight I shall have compassion on you. And your gates shall be open continually. They are not shut day or night, to bring to you the wealth of the nations and their kings in procession. So the image that this gives is that the gates of Jerusalem will be open to a constant procession of the nations coming to honor Yahuwah. For the nation and the kingdom that do not serve you shall perish, and those nations shall be utterly laid waste. So as I said, this isn't like the relationship that we would think of between master and slave, maybe closer to a biblical relationship like that, where there is caregiving which is undertaken by the one who is in charge, but certainly not any kind of oppression or ruling with harshness. The esteem of Lebanon shall come to you, cypress, pine, and the box tree together, to embellish the place of my set-apart place, and I shall make the place of my feet esteemed. Where is the place of his feet? Well, the heavens are his throne, and the earth is his footstool. He makes the place of his feet esteemed. And what we see here is very much like the way that Solomon, when silver was said to be of little value because of all the abundance of gold, as we see Solomon decking out Yahuwah's set-apart place, it is kind of familiar with what we are reading of here, although I'm sure nothing in comparison. And the sons of those who afflicted you come bowing to you, and all those who despised you shall bow themselves at the soles of your feet, and they shall call you city of Yahuwah, Sion of the set-apart one of Israel. Instead of you being forsaken and hated, so that no one passes through you, I shall make you an everlasting excellence, a joy of many generations. And you shall suck the milk of the nations, and shall suckle the breast of kings, and you shall know that I, Yahuwah, your Saviour and your Redeemer, am the mighty of Yaakov. Instead of bronze I bring gold, and instead of iron I bring silver, and bronze instead of wood, which again is like Solomon's day, and iron instead of stones, and I shall make your officers peace, and your magistrates righteousness. So we will have right and just rulers in that day, which is all Yahuwah ever wanted in the first place. Violence shall no longer be heard in your land, neither wasting nor ruin within your borders, and you shall call your walls deliverance and your gates praise. No longer is the sun your light by day, nor does the moon give light to you for brightness, but Yahuwah shall be to you an everlasting light, and your Elohim your comeliness. No longer does your sun go down, and your moon withdraw itself. For Yahuwah shall be your everlasting light, and the days of your mourning shall be ended. And your people, all of them righteous, shall inherit the earth forever, a branch of my planting, a work of my hands, to be adorned. So our turning back to Yahuwah in righteousness and choosing him, he describes as us being a branch of his planting, or a work of his hands in doing that. So we can see that everything that has happened throughout history has all been Yahuwah bringing himself a people in righteousness. The little shall become 1,000, and the small one a strong nation. I, Yahuwah, shall hasten it in its time. Isaiah 61 says, the Spirit of the Master Yahuwah is upon me, because Yahuwah has anointed me to bring good news to the meek. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim release to the captives, and the opening of the prison to those who are bound. Something that Yeshua was said about him, or at least was fulfilled in him. To proclaim the acceptable year of Yahuwah and the day of vengeance of our Elohim, to comfort all who mourn. So there are two components that we're going to see as we go through this. We're going to see this immense abundance and this time of prosperity and peace that he brings on the earth to those whom he declares to be righteous. Also, we're going to see this theme of vengeance upon those who set themselves against him. To appoint unto those who mourn in Sion, to give them embellishment for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, and they shall be called trees of righteousness, a planting of Yahuwah to be adorned. So just like Lazarus, when Abraham replies to the rich man, and he says, in life, basically Lazarus had it rough, but now he is comforted, and you are afflicted, you are suffering. So unto those who mourn, they're given the embellishment of ashes. Those who mourn are given the oil of joy, the garment of praise for those who have a spirit of heaviness, and they shall be called trees of righteousness, a planting of Yahuwah again to be adorned. And they shall rebuild the old ruins, raise up the former wastes, and they shall restore the ruined cities, the wastes of many generations. And strangers shall stand and feed your flocks, and the sons of the foreigner be your plowmen and your vine dressers. But you shall be called priests of Yahuwah, servants of our Elohim, shall be said of you. You shall consume the strength of nations and boast in their esteem. And when we were looking at the resurrections of the dead, we looked at what it was to be a priest of Yahuwah, a Cohen of Yahuwah, one who kahans Yahuwah, one who represents him. So a priest of Elohim, a servant of our Elohim. Instead of your shame and reproach, they rejoice a second time in their portion. Therefore they take possession a second time in their land. Everlasting joy is theirs. And this is when Yahuwah's kingdom has come to be on the earth. You'll notice that it's a second time that they take up their portion. The first time being when Israel dwelt in the land originally. The second time being when Yeshua comes and sent out his angels to gather his people and lead them to the land. There is no intermediate second time when men have gathered themselves into the country known as Israel and have established for themselves a country. Okay, it's a second time. When we go back there at Yeshua's coming, that is the second time that Israel take up their portion, not the third time. For I, Yahuwah, love justice. I hate robbery for a sending offering. In other words, I hate people giving the proceeds of robbery for a burnt offering. And I shall give their reward in truth and make an everlasting covenant with them. And their seed shall be known among the nations, and their offspring in the midst of the peoples. Which tells us one thing: we have seed and we have offspring during the time of the kingdom, and they will be known among the nations as the seed of the people of Yahuwah. As it says here, all who see them shall acknowledge them, that they are the seed Yahuwah has blessed. I greatly rejoice in Yahuwah, my soul exalts in my Elohim, for he has put garments of deliverance on me. He has covered me with the robes of righteousness, as a bridegroom decks himself with ornaments, and as a bride adorns herself with jewels. For as the earth brings forth its bud, as the garden causes the seed to shoot up, so the Master Yahuwah causes righteousness and praise to shoot up before all the nations. Isaiah 62. For Zion's sake I am not silent, and for Yerushalayim's sake I do not rest, until her righteousness goes forth as brightness, and her deliverance as a lamp that burns. And the nations shall see your righteousness, and all kings your esteem, and you shall be called by a new name, which the mouth of Yahuwah designates. And you shall be a crown of comeliness in the hand of Yahuwah, and a royal headdress in the hand of your Elohim. You will be beautified before him, by following his ways. No longer are you called forsaken, and no longer is your land called deserted, but you shall be called Chefzivah, and your land married, for Yahuwah shall delight in you, and your land be married. For as a young man marries a maiden, so shall your sons marry you, and as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your Elohim rejoice over you. I have set watchmen on your walls, O Yerushalayim, all the day and all the night, continually, who are not silent. You who remember Yahuwah, give yourselves no rest, and give him no rest, till he establishes, until he makes Yerushalayim a praise in the earth. And that I take to be a call to pray to Yahuwah for those things to be accomplished. Give him no rest till he establishes, until he makes Yerushalayim a praise in the earth. Yahuwah has sworn by his right hand, and by the arm of his strength, no more do I give your grain to be food for your enemies, nor do sons of the foreigner drink your new wine for which you have labored. But those gathering it shall eat it and praise Yahuwah, and those collecting it shall drink it in my set-apart courts. So Yahuwah says, as part of the curses, the people will plant, and they will not reap of what they plant. Their enemies will reap of it. And he's saying here, he's calling an end to that curse and saying, no more will it be like that, but rather you will dwell in the land, and you will enjoy the abundance of the land, as it should have been in the beginning, if only his people had listened to him. Pass through the gates, prepare the way for the people. Build up the highway, remove the stones, lift up a banner for the peoples. And again here we see a difference between the people and the peoples. Prepare, or lift up rather, a banner for the peoples. That's what his people will be for him during the kingdom. Where he says, pass through the gates, prepare the way for the people. That is Yisrael. Okay, the people of Yisrael. Build up the highway. And what do we see when the dead are raised? They come out of Sheol. The gates of Sheol will not prevail against them. They pass through the gates of Sheol. A way is prepared for them over the deep. The highway is prepared for them. We read of these things in Isaiah 35 and 51. So at the end, when the people in Abraham's bosom depart, it is just like when the people of Israel came out of Egypt and they passed through the Red Sea. They passed through the deep. that actually prophesies of what this is talking about, where they pass through the gates of Sheol. A way and a highway is made for them through the deep to meet Yeshua in the clouds. See, Yahuwah has proclaimed to the end of the earth, say to the daughter of Sion, see, your deliverance is come. See, his reward is with him, and his work before him. And they shall be called the set-apart people, the redeemed of Yahuwah, and you shall be called sought out, a city not forsaken. Isaiah 63 says, who is this coming from Edom, with garments of glowing colours from Botzerah, who is robed in splendour, striding forward in the greatness of his strength? It is I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. And we know who this is. We read in Revelation 19 that this is Yeshua, and he is coming with his robe dipped in blood, and that's what we read of. Why is there red on your raiment, and your garments like one who treads in the winepress? I have trodden the winepress alone, and from the peoples no one was with me. And I trod them down in my displeasure, and I trampled them in my wrath. Their blood is sprinkled upon my garments, and I have defiled all my raiment. For a day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed is come. And I looked, but there was none helping, and I was astonished that there was none upholding. So my own arm saved for me, and my wrath upheld me. And I trod down the peoples in my displeasure, and I made them drunk in my wrath, and brought down their strength to the earth, or to earth. Let me recount the kindnesses of Yahuwah, and the praises of Yahuwah, according to all that Yahuwah has done for us, and the great goodness towards the house of Israel, which he has done for them according to his compassion and according to his many kindnesses. And he said, they are my people, children who do not act falsely, and he became their Saviour. In all their distress he was distressed, and the angel of his presence saved them. In his love and in his compassion he redeemed them, and he lifted them up and carried them all the days of old. But they rebelled and grieved his set-apart spirit, and he turned against them as an enemy, and he fought against them. Then he remembered the days of old, Moshe, his people. Where is he who brought them up out of the sea with the shepherd of his flock? Where is he who put his set-apart spirit within him? And again, this idea of him bringing them up out of the sea, out of the deep, is or was a picture of what happens to us when we come from Abraham's bosom. Okay, there are prophecies that speak of the deep becoming hard and us being able to walk upon it. So he who brought them up out of the sea will be he who brings us up out of the sea at Yeshua's coming. Who led them by the right hand of Moshe with his comely arm, dividing the water before them to make for himself an everlasting name. Who led them through the deep. Like a horse in the wilderness, they did not stumble. As a beast goes down into the valley, and the spirit of Yahuwah causes him to rest, so you led your people to make yourself a comely name. Look down from heaven and see your set-apart and comely dwelling. Where are your ardor and your might, the stirring of your inward parts and your compassion toward me? Are they withheld? For you are our Father, though Abraham does not know us, and Israel does not recognize us. You, O Yahuwah, are our Father, our Redeemer. Your name is from of old. O Yahuwah, why do you make us astray from your ways and harden our hearts from your fear? Turn back for the sake of your servants, the tribes of your inheritance. For a little while your set-apart people possessed it. Our adversaries have trodden down your set-apart place. We have become like those over whom you never ruled. Your name is not called on them. Isaiah 64. Oh, that you would tear the heavens open, come down, that mountains shall shake before you. As when fire burns twigs, as fire makes water boil, to make your name known to your adversaries, so that nations tremble before you. When you did awesome matters which we did not expect, you came down, mountains did shake before you. Since the beginning of the ages, they have not heard nor perceived by the ear, nor has the eye seen any Elohim besides you, who acts for those who wait for him. You shall meet him who rejoices and does righteousness, who remembers you in your ways. See, you were wroth when we sinned in them a long time, and should we be saved? And all of us have become as one unclean, and all our righteousnesses are as soiled rags, and all of us fade like a leaf, and our iniquities like the wind have taken us away. And there is no one who calls on your name, who stirs himself up to be strengthened in you. For you have hidden your face from us, and have consumed us because of our iniquities. And now, O Yahuwah, you are our Father, we are the clay, and you are our potter, and we are all the work of your hand. Do not be wroth, O Yahuwah, nor remember iniquity forever. See, please look, all of us are your people. Your set-apart cities have become a wilderness. Sion has become a wilderness, Jerusalem a waste. Our set-apart and comely house, where our fathers praised you, has been burned up with fire, and all that we treasure has become a ruin. In view of all this, would you restrain yourself, O Yahuwah? Would you keep silent and afflict us beyond measure? Isaiah 65. I have let myself be inquired of, not by those who asked. I was found, not by those who sought me. I said, here I am, to a nation not calling on my name. I have held out my hands all day long to a stubborn people who walk in a way that is not good, after their own thoughts. The people who provoke me continually to my face, who slaughter in gardens and burn incense on altars of brick, who sit among the burial sites and spend the night in secret places, who eat the flesh of pigs, and the broth of unclean meats is in their pots. So his people have become unto him people who ignore his teaching and instruction. He said to not be near burial sites, as they make one unclean, to not eat the flesh of swines, as they are unclean animals, to not eat unclean meats in your pots. They slaughter in the gardens, they burn incense on altars of brick. In other words, they don't give offerings where he said to in his temple. They do it all over the land. The altars of brick are directly against his Torah as well. He says not to make an altar of unhewn, rather to make his altar of unhewn stone, not to make it of hewn stone like bricks. But man has forgotten the way that Yahuwah said is good to walk. Who say, keep to yourself, do not come near me, for I am set apart from you. These are smoke in my nostrils, a fire that burns all day. See, it is written before me, I am not silent, but shall repay, and I shall repay into their bosom. You see, where it says there, who say, keep to yourself, I am set apart from you, that is commonly translated, I am holier than thou. Okay, and what that actually means is his people are saying, we don't want any of your instructions, we are holy from you. Just like the people who say, oh no, we've been made holy by Yeshua's blood now, so we don't have to follow the Torah anymore. They're in complete confusion about the fact that this is at the time of the end, when Yahuwah is about to return. He is calling his people out for having become like this, for saying, oh no, we are set apart from you. Do not come near to us. It is written before me, I am not silent, but shall repay, and I shall repay into their bosom. So he will bring vengeance upon such a people, and we'll see that as we continue. This is right at the point where he returns. Your iniquities and the iniquities of your fathers together, said Yahuwah, who burned incense on the mountains and reproached me on the hills, and I shall measure their former work into their bosom. Thus said Yahuwah, as the new wine is found in the cluster, and one shall say, do not destroy it, for there is blessing in it, so I do for my servant's sake, not to destroy them all. So what he's saying is, just as someone might say, in that cluster of grapes, there is the potential to make new wine. So don't destroy the cluster. He sees his people in the same way. He will not destroy his people once and for all, because there is potential within them. There is a remnant that is within them. Verse 9 says, and I shall bring forth a seed from Yaakov, and from Yehudah, an heir of my mountains. That would be Yeshua. And my chosen one shall inherit it, and my servants dwell there. And Sharon shall be a fold of flocks, and the valley of Achor a place for herds to lie down, for my people who have sought me. But you are those who forsake Yahuwah, who forget my set-apart mountain, who prepare a table for God, and who fill a drink offering for many. Okay, and regrettably, this is how his people have become. They have turned to pagan ways to worship him. They've turned to the worship of Ishtar, the worship of him on Christmas, which is a pagan festival. So he reproaches them here, and he says, you've forgotten my set-apart mountain, you've forgotten my Torah, which goes forth from the land. You have done your own thing. You've gone after these pagan gods. You prepared the table for God. You filled the drink offering for many, these pagan gods. And I shall allot you to the sword, and let you all bow down to the slaughter, because I called and you did not answer. I spoke and you did not hear. You did evil before my eyes, and chose that in which I did not delight. So his people today will say, well, Jesus made all food clean. Actually, that's an addition to the scriptures by the scribes. And it says all food, whereas unclean meat is not food and never has been. Or they'll point to Acts 10, what Peter said, which was not about food. If you read Acts 10 and Acts 11, what it's about is not calling the Gentiles, whom Yahuwah has cleansed, not calling them unclean. He never cleansed unclean meat. So you can't call unclean that which he has called clean, because he never called it clean. But this misunderstanding is pervasive among his people. So he says to them, I will allot you to the sword. Great swaths of his people are expecting to be raptured away when a time of difficulty comes. But what he says is, I will not destroy my people entirely, like I would not destroy the cluster because of the potential of the new wine inside. But those who go after wickedness, those who choose that which in which he did not delight, those he will give to the sword. He will let them all bow down to the slaughter, okay, which may well take the form of them losing their heads because they are not prepared to worship the image of the beast, and thereby they prove their faith. But they will not be those whom Yahuwah protects, those of the Church of Philadelphia, for example, those who have guarded his word, those who are the remnant who keep his Torah and don't listen to ear-tickly things about the Torah having been done away with, or Paul's words being twisted to support anomia, to support lawlessness. Those people, he allots them to the sword. Therefore, thus said the Master Yahuwah, see my servants eat, but you hunger. See my servants drink, but you thirst. See my servants rejoice, but you are put to shame. See my servants sing for joy of heart, but you cry for sorrow of heart, and wail for the breaking of spirit. And you shall leave your name as a curse to my chosen, for the Master Yahuwah shall put you to death, and call his servants by another name. So you don't want to be in that group. Okay, many are called, but few are chosen. Of those who are called are going to be those who are in this group, who eat the flesh of swines, who are, as Yahuwah describes, as smoke in his nostrils. That group who will be given over to the sword, their name will be as a curse to the chosen. And he will call his servants, the chosen, by another name. A name, of course, not only being the thing by which you are called, but also the thing by which you are known, your name, your character. So that he who blesses himself in the earth does bless himself in the Elohim of truth. And he who swears in the earth does swear by the Elohim of truth, because the former distresses shall be forgotten, and because they shall be hidden from my eyes. So there will be a time of distress before all this happens. Those who do not follow his Torah, those who are eating the flesh of swines and all the rest of the things that he listed, they will be given over to the sword, for example, as that time of distress. But that time of distress shall be forgotten, because they shall be hidden from my eyes. For look, I am creating new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered, nor come to heart. But be glad and rejoice forever in what I create. For look, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing, and her people a joy. And I shall rejoice in Jerusalem, and shall joy in my people, and let the voice of weeping no more be heard in her, nor the voice of crying. No more is an infant from there going to live but a few days, nor an old man who does not complete his days. For the youth dies 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be lightly esteemed. So a couple of interesting points there. Firstly, we see that people are going to live much longer, but we also see that there will be sinners in the kingdom. People are still going to have free will to choose to sin or not to sin, because the nations are still going to be present on the earth during the time of the kingdom, when we will rule and reign over the nations. And they shall build houses and inhabit them, and plant vineyards and eat their fruit. They shall not build and another inhabit, they shall not plant and another eat. For the days of my people are going to be as the days of a tree, and my chosen ones outlive the work of their hands. So no longer are we going to create things that will endure beyond our lifetimes. Okay, 100 years old is well beyond the lifetime of most people today. But here, his people are going to outlive the work of their hands. They will have life eternal. They shall not labor in vain and bring forth children for trouble. So again, they bring forth children, for they are the seed of the blessed of Yahuwah, and their offspring is with them. Okay, so again, their offspring, their children. And it shall be that before they call, I answer, and while they are still speaking, I hear. Wolf and lamb feed together, a lion eats straw as an ox, and dust is the snake's food. They shall do no evil, nor destroy in all my set-apart mountains, said Yahuwah. Isaiah 66 says, Thus said Yahuwah, the heavens are my throne, and the earth is my footstool. Where is this house that you build for me? And where is the place of my rest? And all these my hand has made, and all these that exist, declares Yahuwah. Yet to such a one I look, on him who is poor and bruised of spirit, and who trembles at my word. But whoever slays the bull strikes a man. Whoever slaughters the lamb breaks a dog's neck. Whoever brings a grain offering, pig's blood. Whoever burns incense blesses an idol. Indeed, they have chosen their own ways, and their soul delights in their abominations. So Yahuwah speaks elsewhere of hating the festivals that people do when it is also accompanied by disobedience. And this is what he is speaking of here. His people have chosen their own ways. Yes, they might come along to a church meeting and they might sing songs to him or whatever it is, but to him it is as an abomination, because those people have not chosen his way, his teaching and instruction. Rather, they've chosen their own ways. Their soul delights in their abominations. He says that eating the flesh of swine, that eating prawns and octopus and crab and squid, all of that is abomination. That's how he defines it, and yet his people have chosen those things in which he did not delight, and they delight in their abominations. I shall also choose their punishments and bring fears on them, because I called and no one answered. I spoke and they did not hear, and they did evil before my eyes, and chose what was displeasing to me. So he's given us all of this information in his word, that he thinks all of these things are abomination, all those things that he thinks of as evil, and yet man always finds a way to come to some kind of conclusion about what his word says, that, oh no, this has been done away with, or this has been changed. They chose what is displeasing to him. They did evil before his eyes. He said, this is good, this is evil, and they chose what was evil. Hear the word of Yahuwah, you who tremble at his word. Your brothers who hate you, who cast you out for my name's sake, said, let Yahuwah be esteemed, so that we see your joy, but they are put to shame. Okay, so if you are somebody who rejoices and delights in Yahuwah's law, and you have been put out of meetings of, in inverted commas, Christians, because of his name and what he says is right, this verse is for you. A roaring sound from the city, a voice from the temple, the voice of Yahuwah repaying his enemies, not his servants, his enemies. Before she labored, she gave birth. Before a pain came to her, she was delivered of a male child. Who has heard the like of this? Who has seen the like of these? Is a land brought forth in one day? Is a nation born at once? For as soon as Sion labored, she gave birth to her children. Shall I bring to birth and not give delivery, says Yahuwah? Shall I who give delivery restrain birth, said your Elohim? Rejoice with Jerusalem, and be glad with her, all you who love her. Rejoice greatly with her, all you who mourn for her, so that you feed and shall be satisfied with the breast of her comforts, so that you drink deeply and shall delight yourselves in her overflowing esteem. For thus said Yahuwah, see, I am extending peace to her like a river, and the esteem of the nations like a flowing stream. And you shall feed, you shall be carried on the side, and be fondled on her knees. As one whom his mother comforts, so I comfort you. And in Jerusalem you are comforted. And you shall see, and your heart shall rejoice, and your bones flourish as tender grass. And the hand of Yahuwah shall be known to his servants, and his displeasure to his enemies. So just like there are those who are comforted in the depths of the earth in Abraham's bosom, they are the ones who will be raised again in spiritual bodies, and they will inherit the land of Israel, and they will be a people as Yahuwah had envisioned in the first place. And he says, you will be as one whom his mother comforts. So just as they are comforted in the earth, so they will be comforted in Jerusalem. For look, Yahuwah comes with fire, and with his chariots like a whirlwind, to render his displeasure with burning, and his rebuke with flames of fire. For by fire and by a sword Yahuwah shall judge all flesh, and the slain of Yahuwah shall be many. Those who set themselves apart and cleanse themselves at the gardens after one in the midst, eating flesh of pigs, and the abomination and the mouse, are snatched away together, declares Yahuwah. And I, because of their works and their imaginations, am coming to gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my esteem. And I shall set a sign among them, and I shall send some of those who escape to the nations, Tarshish and Pool and Lud, who draw the bow, and Taval and Yavan, the coastlands of far off, who have not heard my report, nor seen my esteem, and they shall declare my esteem among the nations. And they shall bring all your brothers as an offering to Yahuwah out of all the nations, on horses and in chariots and in litters, on mules and on camels, to my set-apart mountain Jerusalem, declares Yahuwah, as the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel into the house of Yahuwah. So this is a persistent theme throughout this. During the kingdom, the time of the kingdom, when the righteous will rule and reign on the earth, they will be a light to the nations, and the nations will bring an offering to the house of Yahuwah. And from them too I shall take for priests, for Levites, declares Yahuwah. For as the new heavens and the new earth that I make stand before me, declares Yahuwah, so your seed and your name shall stand. And it shall be that from Chodesh to Chodesh, and from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahuwah. And they shall go forth and look upon the corpses of the men who have transgressed against me, for their worm shall not die, and their fire not be quenched, and they shall be repulsive to all flesh. Okay, so that is the kingdom. That is the relationship between the nation of Israel and the nations, the Goyim, the Gentiles, as we might say. In Zechariah 8:3-8 it says, Thus said Yahuwah, I shall return to Sion, and I shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called City of Truth, and the mountain of Yahuwah Sabaoth, the set-apart mountain. Thus said Yahuwah Sabaoth, Again, old men and old women shall dwell in the streets of Jerusalem, each one with his staff in his hand, because of great age. And the streets of the city shall be filled with boys and girls playing in its streets. Thus said Yahuwah Sabaoth, If it is marvelous in the eyes of the remnant of this people in these days, should it also be marvelous in my eyes, declares Yahuwah Sabaoth. Thus said Yahuwah Sabaoth, See, I am saving my people from the land of the sunrise and from the land of the sunset. And I shall bring them back, and they shall dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and they shall be my people, and I shall be their Elohim, in truth and in righteousness. And as I've said, that is all that Yahuwah desired from the beginning. Luke 22:29-30 says, And I covenant for you as my Father covenanted for me, a kingdom, to eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and to sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And of course he is talking to his disciples here, but we hear something similar said of us. 1 Corinthians 6 verse 2 says, Do you not know that the set apart one shall judge the world? And if the world is judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? And I think what people have in mind here is that the world is to be judged by us, kind of like in the actual judgment which will be done by Yeshua, as if we will sit and judge them. But that's not what this means. Okay, we will rule and reign with Messiah. Just as in the Torah there were officers and there were judges, it will be the same in the time of the kingdom. We will judge the world in that we will be those people, those ranks amongst the world. We will rule and reign with Messiah, in other words. Daniel 7:27 says, "And the kingdom and the rulership and the greatness of the kingdoms under all the heavens shall be given to the people, the set apart ones of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all rulerships shall serve and obey him." As it says, the greatness of the kingdoms, that is the kingdoms of the world, shall be given to the people, Ha-Am, the set apart ones, the chosen. They will rule and reign with Messiah in the kingdom. So that is what is true of the nation of Yisrael, his chosen, during the time of the kingdom. Zechariah 14:16-19 tells us, it details a very interesting event which will perhaps tell us something of the nations. Now, I think most of the time people read this and they think that this happens before Yeshua comes back, but I think that this happens during the time that we were looking at, after the 1,000 years has ended, when all the nations come and surround Jerusalem. It certainly makes more sense to me. Verse 16 says, "And it shall be that all who are left from all the nations which came up against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to bow themselves to the King Yahuwah Sebaot, and to celebrate the festival of Sukkot. And it shall be that if any one of the clans of the earth does not come up to Jerusalem to bow himself to the King Yahuwah Sebaot, on them there is to be no rain. And if the clan of Mitzrayim, the clan of Egypt, does not come up and enter in, then there is no rain. On them is the plague with which Yahuwah plagues the nations who do not come up to celebrate the festival of Sukkot, that there would be no rain. This is the punishment of Mitzrayim, and the punishment of all the nations that do not come up to celebrate the festival of Sukkot." So that I see as happening at the end of the 1,000 years. After Hasatan has led the nations astray, they are brought into obedience to Yahuwah. They have to come up and celebrate Sukkot. That may be, it may not be. It may also explain the events of Isaiah 19 or put them into a timeline. "And in that day 5 cities in the land of Mitzrayim shall speak the language of Canaan and swear by Yahuwah Sebaot. One is called the city of destruction. In that day an altar to Yahuwah shall be in the midst of the land of Egypt, and a standing column to Yahuwah at its border. And it shall be for a sign and for a witness to Yahuwah Sebaot in the land of Egypt, when they cry to Yahuwah because of the oppressors. He sends them a Saviour and an Elohim, and shall deliver them. And Yahuwah shall be known to Mitzrayim, and the Mitzrites shall know Yahuwah in that day, and make sacrifice and meal offering, and shall make a vow to Yahuwah and pay it. And Yahuwah shall smite Mitzrayim, smite it and heal it, and they shall turn to Yahuwah, and he shall hear them and heal them. In that day there shall be a highway from Mitzrayim to Ashur, and Ashur shall come into Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim into Ashur, that's Egypt and Assyria. And Egypt shall serve with Assyria. In that day Israel shall be one of three, with Mitzrayim and Ashur, even a blessing in the midst of the earth, whom Yahuwah Sabaoth shall bless, saying, Blessed is Mitzrayim my people, and Ashur the work of my hands, and Israel my inheritance. So, if that doesn't happen after the 1,000 years, it happens in the kingdom when Israel are a light to the nations. But it is an interesting event that Yahuwah would refer not only to Israel as his people, but also Egypt, my people, and he would refer not only to Israel as the work of his hands, but also Assyria, the work of his hands, because he brings all of the people to him, all of these people. Matthew 25:31-46 gives us some insight into perhaps where the nations come from during the kingdom. It says, And when the Son of Adam comes in his esteem, and all the set-apart angels with him, then he shall sit on the throne of his esteem, and all the nations shall be gathered before him, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd separates his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. Then the king shall say to those on his right hand, Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. So, in somewhat of a departure from traditional Christian doctrine, we see the nations being brought before him here. Not only the brethren, but also the nations. The nations, it is said of them that the kingdom was also prepared for them from the foundation of the world, because Yahuwah knew how they would act. They're not believers in Yeshua, but they are judged based on how they treat the believers in Yeshua. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous shall answer him, saying, Master, when did we see you hungry, and we fed you, or thirsty, and we gave you to drink? Notice that those of the nations who acted in this way are described as the righteous. And when did we see you a stranger and took you in, or naked and we clothed you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and came to you? And the king shall answer and say to them, Truly I say to you, insofar as you did it to one of these, the least of these my brothers, you did it to me. So it is how they treat his body. He says, you did it to me. He shall then also say to those on the left hand, Go away from me, accursed ones, into the everlasting fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, and you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not take me in. Was naked, and you did not clothe me. Sick and in prison, and you did not visit me. Then they shall also answer him, saying, Master, when did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger, or naked, or sick, or in prison, and did not serve you? Then he shall say to them, saying, Truly I say to you, insofar as you did not do it to one of the least of these, you did it not to me. So Yeshua addresses them here, and he divides the nations, the righteous, from those who have acted wickedly. So these people are judged by their works. They're not believers in Yeshua, and yet they enter into the kingdom if he deems them to be righteous. So he must declare them right. He must justify them based upon their works. And these shall go away into everlasting punishment, but the righteous into everlasting life. So that's how the nations are judged when Yeshua comes in his esteem. Isaiah 66:22-23 says, "For as the new heavens and the new earth that I make stand before me, declares Yahuwah, so your seed and your name shall stand. And it shall be that from Chodesh to Chodesh and from Sabbath to Sabbath, all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahuwah." And that would seem to include the nations who are mentioned as being in the kingdom in Isaiah 60 to 66. In Isaiah 2, we learn something else about these nations at that time. Verse 2 says, "And it shall be in the latter days that the mountain of the house of Yahuwah is established on the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow to it. And many people shall come and say, Come and let us go up to the mountain of Yahuwah, and to the house of the Elohim of Yaakov, and let him teach us his ways, and let us walk in his paths. For out of Zion comes forth the Torah and the word of Yahuwah from Yerushalayim." Okay, so here you see many peoples, many Amim, not Ha'am, the people of Israel. Many peoples will come and they will say, "Let him teach us his ways." Okay, and what they will be learning is, out of Zion comes forth the Torah and the word of Yahuwah. So the nations, as we read of later in the book of Isaiah, they will come to Israel as a light to them. And he shall judge between the nations. So again, the nations, and shall reprove many peoples. Okay, so just like we see with the sheep and the goats, he shall judge between the nations, shall reprove many peoples, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither teach battle anymore. So it will be generally a time of peace. Ezekiel 47 verse 12 says, "By the bank of the stream on both sides grow all kinds of trees used for food, whose leaves do not wither and fruit do not fail. They bear fruit every Chodesh, because their water flows from the set apart place, and their fruit shall be for food, and their leaves for healing." We get more detail about that in Revelation 22. Verse 1 says, "And he showed me a river of water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb. In the middle of its street, and on either side of the river, was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree doesn't just say were for healing, it says they were for the healing of the nations." So again, the nations are mentioned as being a part of the kingdom. And with that in mind, let's read Revelation 21 and 22, because just like Isaiah 60 to 66, they tell us much detail about the kingdom. Revelation 21. "And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the former heaven and the former earth had passed away, and the sea is no more," which statement makes more sense to us now after the first part of this series. "And I, Yochanan, saw the set-apart city, New Yerushalayim, coming down out of heaven from Elohim, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, See, the tabernacle of Elohim is with men, and he shall dwell with them, and they shall be his people, and Elohim himself shall be with them, and be their Elohim. And Elohim shall wipe away every tear from their eyes. All of this shall be familiar to us from Isaiah. And there shall be no more death, nor mourning, nor crying, and there shall be no more pain, for the former matters have passed away. And he who was sitting on the throne said, See, I make all matters new. And he said to me, Write, for these words are trustworthy and true. And he said to me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To the one who thirsts I shall give the fountain of the water of life without payment. The one who overcomes shall inherit all this, and I shall be his Elohim, and he shall be my son. But as for the cowardly and untrustworthy and abominable and murderers and those who fornicate and sorcerers and idolaters and all the false, their part is in the lake which burns with fire and sulphur, which is the second death. And one of the 7 angels who held the 7 bowls filled with the last 7 plagues came to me and spoke with me, saying, Come, I shall show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in the spirit to a great and high mountain, and showed me the great city, the set apart Jerusalem, descending out of the heaven from Elohim, having the esteem of Elohim, and her light was a most precious stone. Her light was like a most precious stone, like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. And having a great and high wall, having 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels, and names written on them, which are those of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, and 3 gates on the west. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and on them were the names of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And he who spoke with me had a golden measuring rod to measure the city and its gates and its wall. And the city lies 4-cornered, and its length is as great as its breadth. And he measured the city with the rod 12,000 stadia. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. And he measured its wall 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man, that is, of an angel. And the structure of the wall was jasper, and the city was clean gold like clear glass. And the foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with all kinds of precious stones. The first foundation jasper, the second sapphire, the third agate, the fourth emerald, the fifth sardonyx, the sixth ruby, the seventh chrysolite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th chrysoprase, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th amethyst. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Each one of the gates was a single pearl, and the street of the city was clean gold like transparent glass. And I saw no temple in it, for Yahuwah El Shaddai is its temple and the Lamb. And this is something which causes confusion to people, because in Ezekiel 40 verse 2 it says, In visions of Elohim he brought me into the land of Israel and set me on a very high mountain, and upon it toward the south was as the structure of a city. And here a temple is revealed to Ezekiel, and people, because of the similarity, I think, between what we're reading in Revelation and what it says in Ezekiel about the angel doing the measuring, I think people get confused about the New Jerusalem and the temple which is revealed to Ezekiel. Here we see that Ezekiel is on a very high mountain, and there was a city to the south. Doesn't say it's New Jerusalem, it just says a city. So this temple which Ezekiel sees is not in the New Jerusalem. So when it says here in verse 22, I saw no temple in it, for Yahuwah El Shaddai is its temple and the Lamb. it is talking about in New Jerusalem. It doesn't contradict Ezekiel 40, which talks of a temple on a very high mountain. And we see in Isaiah that all of the nations are bringing offerings to Yahuwah. They're just not bringing them to New Jerusalem, to a temple in New Jerusalem. Verse 23 says, "And the city had no need of the sun, nor of the moon to shine in it, for the esteem of Elohim lightened it, and the Lamb is its lamp. And the nations of those who are saved shall walk in its light, and the kings of the earth bring their esteem into it. And its gates shall not be shut at all by day, for night shall not be there. And they shall bring the esteem and the appreciation of the nations into it." Their offerings, however, are given at the temple detailed in Ezekiel 40 through 48. "And they shall by no means enter into it whatever is unclean, neither anyone doing abomination and falsehood, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life." Revelation 22 says, "And he showed me a river of the water of life, clear as crystal, coming from the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb. In the middle of its street and on either side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each tree yielding its fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And no longer shall there be any curse, and the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. And they shall see his face, and his name shall be upon their foreheads. And night shall be no more, and they shall have no need of a lamp, or the light of the sun, because Yahuwah Elohim shall give them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. And he said to me, These words are trustworthy and true, and Yahuwah Elohim of the set-apart prophets has sent his angels to show his servants what has to take place with speed. See, I am coming speedily. Blessed is he who guards the words of the prophecy of this book. And I, Yochanan, saw and heard these matters, and when I heard and saw, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel who showed me these matters. And he said to me, See, do not, for I am your fellow servant, and of your brothers the prophets, and of those who are guarding the words of this book. Worship Elohim. Which is interesting, because when he falls down and worships Yeshua, towards the beginning of Revelation, Yeshua says no such thing to him. And he said to me, Do not seal the words of the prophecy of this book, because the time is near. He who does wrong, let him do more wrong. He who is filthy, let him be more filthy. He who is righteous, let him be more righteous. He who is set apart, let him be more set apart. And see, I'm coming speedily, and my reward is with me, to give to each according to his work. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Blessed are those doing his commands, so that the authority shall be theirs unto the tree of life, and to enter through the gates into the city. But outside are the dogs, and sorcerers, and those who whore, and the murderers, and the idolaters, and all who love and do falsehood. And actually, all of those terms are terms used for people who do not keep Torah in the rest of the scriptures. So we have the set-apart people who are in New Jerusalem, the nation Israel, and outside the gates of the New Jerusalem are the nations, and they do bring things into New Jerusalem, but they themselves are outside. Verse 16 says, I, Yeshua, have sent my angels to witness to you these matters in the assemblies. I am the root and the offspring of David, the bright morning star. And the Spirit and the bride say, Come. And he who hears, let him say, Come. And he who thirsts, come. And he who desires it, take the water of life without paying. For I witness to everyone hearing the words of the prophecy of this book, If anyone adds to them, Elohim shall add to him the plagues that are written in this book. And if anyone takes away from the words of this book, of the book of this prophecy, Elohim shall take away his part from the book of life, which gave me pause for thought as I was highlighting certain words out of the paragraphs and not others. But I've not taken away from the words of the book. And out of the set-apart city which are written in this book, he that bears witness of these matters says, yes, I am coming speedily. Amen. Yes, come, Master Yeshua. And we know to Yahuwah 1,000 years is as but a day. So he speaks here of coming speedily, but not speedily to our understanding, perhaps. The favor of our Master Yeshua Messiah be with the set-apart ones. Amen. Okay, so we have a prophecy there given by the mouth of Yochanan, John, the disciple whom Yeshua loved, who rested on Yeshua's breast at the Last Supper. In Isaiah 46, 9-10, it says, remember the former events of old, for I am El, and there is no one else, Elohim, and there is no one like me, declaring the end from the beginning and from of old, that which has not yet been done, saying, my counsel does stand, and all my delight I do. So everything that we read in the book of Isaiah, everything that we read in Zechariah, all of the prophets, everything in the book of Revelation, every prophecy that's in Scripture, his counsel does stand, and that is exactly what he will do. Isaiah 45:23 says, I have sworn by myself, a word has gone out of my mouth in righteousness, and shall not return, so that to me every knee shall bow, every tongue swear, be it Israel or be it the nations in the kingdom, all will come giving praises to Yahuwah. So now, finally, I'll give you the summary of the 3 parts of the Life After Death teaching. Life After Death Part 1 summary. There are 2 deaths to which we can be subject. The physical death, which is the first death, and the second death in the lake of fire. We are all subject to the first death because we have all sinned. There are 2 fates for all mankind when they are judged, eternal life and eternal destruction in the pit, the deep, the sea, the abyss, the bottomless pit, the lake of fire, Gehenna, whichever term you want to use to refer to it. Some have been ransomed from the second death by Yeshua's atoning death. In order to be deemed righteous in Yahuwah's sight and to be raised to eternal life, one must repent and be cleansed by Yeshua's blood. That was the ransom that was paid for us. Life After Death Part 2 summary. Yeshua's soul went to paradise in Sheol when he died, just as ours will, where he preached the gospel to those who had died before Torah was given. He was resurrected to life after 3 days, just as we will be resurrected at the time appointed for us. Sheol is a place where the soul is conscious, waiting for resurrection, or being thrown into the lake of fire. Some are comforted, like Lazarus. Some are tormented, like the rich man. Ultimately, we will sleep with our fathers. The wicked do not burn in agony forever, but suffer eternal destruction in unquenchable fire in the pit, the deep, the sea, the abyss, the bottomless pit, the lake of fire, Gehenna. Life After Death Part 3 summary. There will be 2 resurrections of the dead. Sometimes people get confused that people were resurrected after Yeshua's resurrection, as if that is part of the resurrection of the dead. It is not. Those people were resurrected just like Lazarus was resurrected. All the people Elijah resurrected, those people were resurrected to life and would have died again afterwards. That one was not one of the resurrections of the dead. They will be raised in one of the two, ultimately. The righteous from the nations and from the nation, Israel, will inherit the kingdom. The wicked will be cast into the lake of fire and suffer the second death. All people will be judged by their works, and faith will be accounted as righteousness to those who have repented and believed. His people will be a light to the nations in the kingdom. Eye has not seen, and ear has not heard, nor have entered into the heart of man what Elohim has prepared for those who love him. And ultimately, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth among those who will miss out.